My name is Marceline, 34 years old. The late afternoon light spilled through my kitchen window, soft and golden, catching the edges of the crystal glasses I'd lined up along the counter. The dining table, rarely used, was dressed in white linen with a centerpiece of fresh lilies and roses I'd splurged on from the florist downtown. Their scent filled the air, subtle but warm, the kind of detail I hoped my mother might notice. In the corner, boxes from the catering company waited to be unpacked. The menu had taken me weeks to finalize, each dish chosen for someone specific. Chicken parmesan for Mom, lasagna for Dad, grilled salmon for Haley, steak for Colin. I'd even ordered a triple-layer chocolate cake that cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget. I moved from room to room, straightening chairs, adjusting picture frames, running a cloth over already spotless counters. My little house, modest but tidy, felt almost grand today. It had to. We hadn't all been together in months, and I wanted tonight to be a reminder to them, and to myself, that we were still a family. No friends, no colleagues, just us. They always said they understood my preference for quiet gatherings over loud parties. They joked that I hated big crowds, that I couldn't handle chaos. Maybe that was true. Or maybe I just wanted fewer distractions, a space where I could finally hear their laughter without worrying it was at my expense. I caught my reflection in the living room mirror. My hair was pulled back neatly, my sweater a deep green that brought out my eyes. Not glamorous, but presentable. I forced a smile, picturing the warmth of seeing them all walk through the door, the clink of glasses, the hum of conversation, the shared nostalgia. My siblings teasing me in that harmless way families do. But beneath that image was a flicker of unease I couldn't name, a shadow across an otherwise perfect evening. I brushed it aside and went back to arranging the silverware, determined to make every detail flawless. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I believed that if everything looked right, maybe everything else would be too. By midnight, the house was silent. The table still set, the flowers fragrant in the air. I sank into the couch with a mug of tea, its steam curling upward. The stillness pressed against me, heavy and expectant. Out of habit, I opened my laptop. Just a quick check of emails before bed. That's when I saw it. One unread message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was short, almost plain. For Marceline. Spam, I thought at first. My cursor hovered over the trash icon, but there was something about the deliberate way my name was typed, each letter precise, intentional, that made me hesitate. I clicked. The email was stark. No greeting, no explanation, just 2 sentences. Watch this video and find out how your family really treats you. My pulse quickened. Below, a single attachment. My finger hovered over the trackpad. A dozen reasons to ignore it rushing through my head. Viruses, scams, bad jokes. But curiosity had already rooted itself, thick and insistent. I pressed play. The video opened grainy, colors muted. The image stuttered before sharpening. My stomach clenched as I recognized the setting. Bright cabinets, scuffed wooden table, the small kitchen at my sister Haley's apartment. Around it sat my parents, Haley and Colin. Wine glasses and beer bottles littered the table. Their faces were flushed, voices overlapping in drunken ease. Someone adjusted the camera angle, and the sound grew clearer. My mother's voice, casual, almost cheerful, floated through the speakers. We only really like Marceline when she sends us money. I froze. The words seemed impossible, detached from reality. But then my father lifted his beer bottle, raising it in a careless toast. Yeah, he laughed. The more money she sends, the more we like her. The table erupted with laughter, loud, unrestrained, the kind that comes when no one fears consequence. I gripped my mug tighter, my knuckles white. Haley leaned back, wiping tears from her eyes. Oh my God, you're terrible. But seriously, it's hilarious watching her try to dress up for things. She has zero taste. Looks pathetic in those outfits. My gaze dropped involuntarily to the sweater I wore, the one I'd chosen carefully for tomorrow. Colin shook his head, grinning. And I can't believe she's having her birthday at home. What's the point of money if you don't spend it on us? She's probably just too afraid of big crowds. More laughter. Then Colin added, almost smug, best part is, we don't even have to give her anything expensive. Honestly, I don't want to give her anything at all. Haley chimed in eagerly. Right. She gives us way too little anyway. All she covers is rent, and maybe throws me $100 or $200. It's not enough. My stomach twisted. Every month I sent Haley nearly 1,000 on top of her rent. My mother nodded, as if approving a business plan. We need to figure out how to hint she should take better care of her family, make her feel guilty about not doing enough. And then my father sealed it, eyes glinting as he raised his bottle again. To our little ATM. The clink of glass echoed, a cruel anthem. The mug slipped from my trembling hands, hitting the rug with a dull thud. I sat paralyzed, the word ATM ricocheting in my skull. The video ended. The screen went black, leaving only my reflection staring back at me. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then something sharper than grief cut through. Anger. Not the dull, familiar ache I'd carried for years, but something clean, searing. Memories crashed in. Teenage shifts at the diner, while friends went to football games. Scholarships I fought for so my parents wouldn't pay a cent for my education. Freelance projects I took on instead of vacations. Every rent payment, every emergency transfer, every no to myself so I could say yes to them. And for what? So they could laugh. So I could be their punchline. The ache in my chest burned hotter. I knew if I confronted them, they'd twist it, paint me as overreacting. But silence. Silence could be louder than any accusation. I closed the laptop slowly, the room thick with shadows. In the stillness, one thought solidified, heavy but certain. This family dinner would never happen, and neither would any other. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in the dim light of my bedroom. The glow of the laptop still burned into my vision. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the word again. ATM. Their laughter replayed like a cruel chorus, looping endlessly. By morning, my body felt hollow, drained, as if I'd aged years overnight. The untouched dinner table downstairs waited like a monument to my foolishness. White linen, polished glasses, flowers still blooming, everything I'd set up for a celebration that would never come. I wanted to rip it all apart, but instead I stood there staring, paralyzed by the realization that all of it had been for nothing. I turned back to the laptop, reopening the video. Part of me hated myself for clicking, but another part, the wounded, disbelieving part, needed to make sure I hadn't imagined it. The footage played again, every word clearer now, every glance and smirk cutting deeper. Haley's giggles, Colin's shrug, my mother's nodding approval, my father's mocking toast. I paused it on their faces. My mother, eyes narrowed as if conspiring. My father, carefree, leaning back in his chair. Haley, smug. Colin, smirking like he'd just won something. The ache in my chest spread to my stomach, twisting it into knots. I thought of Haley's constant texts. Hey sis, can you cover my phone bill this month? Or Colin's late night calls. Rent's late again. You think you could spot me? And my parents, always hinting, never asking outright. We'd love to go on a little trip, but you know how expensive flights are. I'd told myself I was helping because family sticks together, because one day they'd be there for me too. But the truth stared at me from the screen. They didn't love me. They loved what I gave them. I clicked pause again, frozen on the moment my father's lips formed that word. ATM. A laugh escaped me then. Sharp. Bitter. That's all I am to you, I whispered to the empty room. Not your daughter, not your sister, just your machine. I sank into the couch, pressing my palms to my eyes. Images from my past spilled in, relentless. 17 years old, bussing tables at the diner while my friends went to prom. I told Mom I didn't care about the dance, that I'd rather earn money. But really, I just couldn't bear to ask her for a dress. 22, working 2 jobs while finishing my degree, sending half my paycheck home so Dad could get back on his feet. 28, skipping a vacation I'd saved months for because Haley called crying that she was short on rent again. Year after year, sacrifice after sacrifice, each one justified because it was for them, for family. And this was how they repaid me. The anger grew hotter, sharper, feeding itself on every memory. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text from Mom. We're so excited for tonight. Don't forget Dad likes extra cheese on the lasagna. The words blurred before my eyes. I nearly hurled the phone across the room. My hand shook so badly I had to set it down. I laughed again, hollow this time. They were still expecting dinner, expecting me to smile and serve them as if nothing had happened. But something inside me had broken, and there was no fixing it. My mind spun, latching onto ideas, desperate for control. I opened my laptop not to replay the video again, but to make a plan. First, the catering. $800 already spent. My hand hovered over the invoice before I called the restaurant. Hi, this is Marceline. I need to change the delivery address. Of course, ma'am. Where to? The downtown homeless shelter, I said quickly. Same time, same order, just different people. The woman on the other end paused, then her voice softened. That's very generous. We'll make sure it arrives fresh. I hung up, my heart pounding. One small victory. They wouldn't feast off my money tonight. Next, the locks. I dialed a locksmith. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., I said. Every lock changed. It's urgent. He didn't ask why. He just took the details and promised he'd be there. Finally, I opened a new tab. Flights. One word filled the search bar. Hawaii. Dozens of results popped up. I scanned them with the urgency of someone drowning. A 4 a.m. departure, landing in Honolulu by afternoon. Perfect. My hand trembled as I booked the most expensive penthouse suite I could find, a place I never would have let myself dream of before. But tonight, I wasn't dreaming. I was taking my life back. I shut the laptop and sat back, staring at the silent room. The plan wrapped around me like armor, piece by piece. I could almost feel the weight of their disappointment tomorrow night when they arrived at my door, found it locked, and realized I was gone. For years, I had been their provider, their scapegoat, their fool, but not anymore. My phone buzzed again. Haley this time. Don't forget the chocolate cake. You know it's my favorite. My jaw clenched, my chest burned. I typed back one word, noted. Then I tossed the phone onto the table. Upstairs, I dragged out my suitcase. I filled it with clothes that weren't chosen to impress anyone, not even them. Comfortable dresses, sandals, a sun hat I'd bought years ago, but never worn. As I zipped it shut, I whispered aloud, never again. The words felt strange, foreign, but powerful. Tomorrow, while they stood on my porch waiting, I'd be thousands of miles away, free. I climbed into bed, suitcase by the door, laptop closed, phone silenced. My eyes stayed open long into the night, staring at the ceiling. I thought of their laughter, their careless words, and the truth finally settled, cold but steady. If they could betray me so easily, what else were they capable of? That thought kept me awake until the first light of dawn. The alarm rang at 2 a.m., though I'd barely slept. My suitcase was already by the door, its wheels aligned like a soldier waiting for orders. I moved through the house in silence, careful not to disturb the flowers still sitting in their vase, the table still set as if frozen in time. The white linen cloth looked ghostly in the dim light, plates gleaming, silverware catching shadows. It was like walking through a mausoleum of my own foolish hope. I paused at the dining table, my hand brushing the edge, and whispered, "Goodbye." Not to the table, but to the illusion I had built around it. At precisely 8, the locksmith would come. By then, I'd be gone. The thought filled me with a strange, buoyant calm. I slung my bag over my shoulder and stepped outside into the cool, pre-dawn air. The street was quiet, save for the hum of an approaching car. The Uber driver pulled up, offering a polite nod as I slid into the back seat. "Airport?" he asked, voice low, respectful of the hour. "Yes." We drove in silence, the only sounds the low drone of the engine and the rhythmic flash of passing streetlights. My thoughts spiraled with each turn of the wheels. Would they pound on my door tonight, calling my name? Would they peer through the windows, confused at the locked house? Would their laughter fade into anger when they realized I wasn't coming? I pictured their faces when they saw the catering truck pull up, not to my door, but to the shelter downtown. Strangers would eat the feast meant for them. People who would be grateful. The idea gave me a small, defiant satisfaction. At the airport, the world felt liminal. Bright lights, muffled announcements, the clatter of suitcases. Travelers shuffled half asleep, clutching coffees, boarding passes in hand. I blended in among them, invisible, untethered. Security, gate check, boarding. Each step carried me further from their reach. By 4:00 a.m., I was seated by the window, watching the plane's wings slice through the fog. As the engines roared and the runway blurred, I felt the weight of decades lift, if only slightly. For the first time in years, I was going somewhere without carrying their expectations in my suitcase. The flight stretched long, but strangely calm. I sipped bitter coffee, half-watched a movie, drifted in and out of restless sleep. Every time my phone buzzed from the seat pocket, I ignored it. Their names must have been lighting up my screen one after another, but I refused to look. When we landed in Honolulu, the warmth hit me instantly. The air smelled faintly of salt and flowers, wrapping around me like something I hadn't known I needed. By the time I checked into the penthouse suite, the afternoon sun was already bending toward the horizon. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the ocean, vast and endless, waves glittering like molten glass. The suite was decadent. Marble counters, plush sofas, a balcony big enough for a dance floor. I stood at the glass wall, staring at the ocean until my chest ached. My phone vibrated again. This time I let it ring. Mom, Dad, Haley, Colin, one after another, relentless. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand. The vibration rattled against the wood, insistent, almost alive. Then the text poured in. "We're here. Where are you? This isn't funny. Answer us. We're waiting outside." I scrolled through slowly, imagining them standing on my porch, confusion turning to irritation, irritation to panic. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I could ignore them completely, but something in me wanted them to see, to know. So I attached the video, their own voices, their own laughter, and typed only one sentence beneath it. "Away from the toxic family." I pressed send, watched the blue checkmark appear, then powered the phone off completely. The silence afterward was profound, almost holy. I stepped out onto the balcony, the ocean breeze cool against my skin. Below, waves rolled against the shore, steady and timeless. Above, the sky burned orange, fading into dusk. I closed my eyes and whispered, "This is mine." That first night in Hawaii, I lay on crisp white sheets, listening to the ocean instead of their demands. It felt strange, unnatural, as if I'd forgotten something urgent. My body kept bracing for a knock on the door, a buzzing phone, a guilt-laden request. None came. Morning broke with sunlight streaming through the glass. I lingered in bed, stretching like a child with no responsibilities. I ordered room service, pancakes, fresh fruit, coffee. When the knock came, it wasn't Haley begging for money, but a polite waiter wheeling in a cart. For once I ate slowly, savoring each bite. Still, a restlessness tugged at me. Decades of conditioning didn't vanish overnight. I caught myself thinking, I should call them. Before shaking my head violently, no, that door was locked, literally and metaphorically. By the third day, my skin was sun-warmed, my hair faintly scented with salt water. I wandered through boutiques without checking price tags, dipped my feet into the surf, let the waves pull at me playfully. Evenings were slower. I'd sip wine in the hotel lounge, watching strangers laugh freely. It was liberating, but unsettling too. Each quiet hour felt like stolen time, a gift I hadn't earned. And yet it was mine. Still, when I thought of them, standing outside my house, bewildered and angry, the satisfaction wasn't enough to drown the unease. I knew them too well. They wouldn't let me go so easily. The ocean had a way of tricking me into forgetting. Mornings were wrapped in sunlight, the waves curling like silver ribbons against the sand. I'd sit on the balcony of the suite, a cup of coffee in hand, pretending the past hadn't followed me here. For the first time in years, I felt untethered. I ate when I wanted, bought what I wanted, slept without setting an alarm. No desperate calls from Dad at 2 a.m., no guilt-riddled texts from Haley, no passive-aggressive hints from Mom. And yet, guilt itself still lingered inside me like a ghost. Sometimes, as I stretched on a lounge chair by the pool, I'd hear my father's voice in my head. Family sacrifices for each other. Or my mother's sigh, "If you loved us more, you'd understand." Even here, in paradise, those phrases carried a weight I couldn't shake. By the sixth day, the strangeness of silence had shifted into something sturdier. The constant hum of responsibility I'd carried under my skin for decades was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar calm. Still, part of me didn't trust it. Peace felt like something borrowed, not owned. It was on the seventh day that my phone, long powered off, buzzed to life again. At first I ignored it, then curiosity pulled me in. Among the dozens of unread messages and missed calls, one stood out. Not from Mom, Dad, Haley, or Colin. From an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Marceline, it's Elena. Can we meet, just the two of us? It's important." Elena, Colin's ex-girlfriend. We'd crossed paths at family gatherings, shared polite conversations. I'd always liked her quiet presence, though we were never close. Something about her tone unsettled me. Direct. Urgent. I typed back before I could overthink. "I'm in Honolulu, back in town soon. What's this about?" Her reply came quickly. It can't wait. I'll fly out, please. And so, the next afternoon, I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe, tucked along a shaded street in Waikiki, my stomach tight. Elena walked in looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, sunglasses perched atop her head. She spotted me immediately, scanning the room as though afraid of being followed, before sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice low, fingers tightening around her coffee cup. I nodded cautiously. "What's going on?" She hesitated, glancing toward the windows. Then, leaning closer, she whispered, "I'm the one who sent you that video." For a moment, I just stared at her, unblinking. The air between us seemed to vanish. "You?" My voice cracked with disbelief. She nodded quickly. "That night, I was at Haley's place. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, they were talking about you. Laughing. Calling you an ATM. Making fun of your clothes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing." My chest tightened, the memory of that grainy footage flooding back. "I knew you'd never believe it without proof," she continued. So I hit record on my phone. Silence stretched between us. 1,000 questions jostled in my mind. Why her? Why now? "Why anonymously?" I asked finally. Her eyes flicked down to her coffee. "I didn't want Colin to know. He already hated whenever I defended you, said I was being dramatic. After you cut them off, I started seeing him for what he really is. He didn't care about you losing contact. He only cared that his rent wasn't being paid anymore." She paused, voice trembling. "So I broke up with him." I exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and sadness flooding me. Relief that someone, anyone, had seen me. Sadness that even love in our family had been transactional. "You didn't have to tell me this," I said softly, "but I'm glad you did." Elena leaned in even closer now, her voice dropping. "There's something else. They're angry, Marceline. Furious. And they're planning something." My stomach flipped. "What do you mean?" She glanced around the cafe again, as if expecting my family to burst in. "I've heard them talking. Your mom, your dad, Haley. They're planning to shame you publicly, to make you look like the selfish one. They're going to twist the story, post things online, tell people you abandoned them. They think if enough people believe it, you'll have to come back. You'll have to defend yourself." The words landed like a blow. I'd known they wouldn't let me go quietly, but hearing it confirmed turned my skin cold. "They want to destroy your reputation," Elena whispered. "Make you crawl back to them." I sat back in my chair, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The cafe around us blurred, clinking cups, murmured conversations fading into static. For years, I'd been afraid of disappointing them, afraid of being cast as the selfish one, and now they were weaponizing that fear. I forced my voice steady. "Thank you for warning me." She reached across the table, touching my hand lightly. "Be careful. They're not going to stop." I nodded, meeting her eyes. For the first time since everything began, I felt something fierce rise inside me. Not fear, not grief, but resolve. "I'll be ready for whatever they try," I said, and I meant it. When I returned to the hotel, I stood on the balcony as night settled over Honolulu. Lights sparkled across the shoreline. Waves hissed softly against the sand. For the first time in years, my life was mine. But as I stared into the dark horizon, one truth anchored itself deep in my chest. This wasn't over. They were coming for me, and this time I wouldn't be running. Back home, the air felt different. Colder, sharper, even though the season hadn't changed. Maybe it was me, lighter in some ways, but also bracing for impact. Hawaii had been an escape, not a solution. I knew that now. At first, it started small. A message from an old high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, your mom reached out. She said you've been struggling. Is everything okay?" The words made my stomach churn. Already the narrative was spreading. Then came more. Mutual acquaintances suddenly checking in, all parroting the same lines. That I'd abandoned my family, that they were worried sick, that I'd cut them off for no reason. It was almost impressive how quickly they'd mobilized, rewriting the story to paint themselves as victims. I didn't answer any of them. But ignoring didn't make them stop. One afternoon, as I left the office, I froze. Across the street, leaning against a lamppost, was Haley. Arms folded, lips curved in a mocking smile, as if she knew exactly how unnerved I'd feel seeing her there. I quickened my pace, heart pounding, but I didn't look back. When I reached my car, my hands trembled so badly I fumbled with the keys. The next day, she wasn't there. But 2 days later, Colin was, sitting in his car across from the building, sunglasses on, engine idling, watching. I told myself it was coincidence, that they just happened to be there. But when the pattern repeated, Haley one day, Colin another, then even my parents standing together pretending to check their phones, it was impossible to deny. They weren't waiting for a chance to talk. They were reminding me that they could appear whenever they wanted. The following week, security at my office intercepted my father trying to step inside. When they turned him away, he raised his voice just enough to draw attention. "I just want to see my daughter. Is that so wrong?" Every pair of eyes in the lobby turned toward me. Heat flooded my face as the guard ushered me to the elevators. I hated that he'd made me feel like the villain in front of strangers. By the time I got upstairs, my phone had already buzzed with messages from coworkers. "Is everything okay? That was your dad, right?" Exactly what they wanted. Me looking unhinged, heartless. Then came the bank alerts. A call from my financial institution. "Ms. Hartley, we've had multiple failed attempts to access your accounts. They're originating from your hometown." I gripped the phone tighter. "Do you mean my parents' address?" The representative hesitated. "We can't confirm exact addresses for security reasons, but yes, very close." I changed every password, added two-factor authentication, even switched my security questions. Still, the notifications kept coming. They were desperate enough to pry into every corner of my life, but careless enough to fail. One evening, exhausted, I sat across from Elena at a small diner. She stirred her tea absently, eyes scanning me. "They're trying to break you," she said quietly, first with guilt, now with fear. I nodded, though my chest was tight. "It's working," I admitted. "Every time I leave the office, I expect to see them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but the possibility is enough." She reached across the table, her hand warm against mine. "Listen, they can follow you, they can spread lies, but they can't control you anymore, not unless you give them that power." Her words sank in, heavy but grounding. I squeezed her hand back. "I know, but it feels like I'm walking through a minefield. One wrong step and, boom, they'll twist it all, say, 'See, she's unstable.'" Elena's expression hardened. "Then don't give them anything. No texts, no calls, no explanations. Silence will be louder than any defense." I wanted to believe her. The next day, as I walked out of work, Haley was there again, leaning against a car across the street, chewing gum, smirking. She didn't speak. She didn't move, just watched. It took everything in me not to march over and demand why. Instead, I kept my steps steady, my eyes forward, heart hammering against my ribs. Security walked me to my car. When I got home, the silence was suffocating. Every creak of the house made me tense, convinced they'd somehow found a way in despite the new locks. At night, I lay awake listening, imagining footsteps outside my window. One evening, just after sunset, I found a folded piece of paper wedged under my windshield wiper. My breath caught as I pulled it free. 2 words were scrawled across it: "Call us." The handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. My hands shook, but I didn't call. I crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash before walking inside, locking the door, bolting the windows. That night, sleep didn't come. I sat on the couch in the dark, every shadow stretching long across the walls, every sound amplified. For years, I'd bent myself to their needs, believing obedience would keep the peace. But this wasn't peace, it was warfare, and I was finally learning how to fight back. The first sign came on a Monday morning. I was sipping coffee at my desk when a coworker, Denise, leaned over hesitantly. "Hey, Marceline," she said, lowering her voice. "I saw something online about you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" She winced. "A post. Look, I don't know if it's true or not, but it was from your mom, or at least someone with her name and picture. It said you've abandoned them, that you cut off your family, left them struggling." Her eyes searched mine, full of cautious sympathy. I forced a tight smile. "People say all kinds of things online, Denise. Don't believe everything you read." She nodded quickly, apologizing, but the damage was done. The words replayed in my head, bitter and relentless. She'd actually done it. By lunch, 3 more coworkers had approached me in subtle ways, some curious, others judgmental. And when I checked my phone, I saw it myself. Facebook posts, comments, even threads on community pages. "Our daughter left us to starve. We don't know what we did wrong. We only ever loved her. She turned her back on her family for money and vacations." Each sentence dripped with calculated pain, perfectly crafted to sting. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, strangers offering pity to them, outraged toward me. I closed the app, my pulse hammering. By the end of the week, the narrative had spread like wildfire. I was no longer just a daughter who left. I was a selfish woman, heartless enough to abandon her aging parents and needy siblings. At work, I felt eyes on me, whispers when I walked past. Even my boss, usually formal, asked in a carefully neutral tone, "Everything all right at home?" It was humiliating. Years of professionalism erased by a story they'd spun in a few sentences. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the blank wall, my phone buzzing with notifications I refused to check. I wanted to scream, to post the video everywhere, to shout, "This is who they really are." But Elena's words echoed in my mind. Silence will be louder than any defense. So I said nothing. The silence burned. Days turned into weeks. Every time I thought the smear campaign might die down, they found new ways to feed it. Old family photos surfaced online, captioned with false nostalgia, back when she still cared. Friends of theirs, neighbors, church acquaintances chimed in, reinforcing the story. I kept my head down, but inside, the humiliation gnawed. One afternoon, I found my father waiting just outside my office building. He stepped directly into my path, his hand outstretched like we were strangers meeting for the first time. "We need to talk," he said, his voice pitched to carry just enough to draw attention. I froze, the weight of coworkers' eyes prickling the back of my neck. "Dad, please." "Just 5 minutes," he pressed, his tone threaded with both command and plea. "You owe us that much." Security intervened before I could respond, guiding me past him, their hands firm on my shoulders. My father's voice followed, shaking with carefully rehearsed grief. "Marceline, don't do this. We're your family." The lobby fell silent, all eyes on me. I didn't turn back. In the elevator, my knees nearly buckled. It was working. His performance, their posts, the whispers. They were turning me into the villain in everyone's eyes. That night, I called Elena. My voice cracked as soon as she answered. "They're winning," I said. "No," she replied firmly. "They're louder. That's not the same as winning." I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the window, staring out at the city lights. "It feels the same." She hesitated, then said softly, "Do you want me to release the video?" The question hung heavy in the air. I pictured it. My family's words, their mocking laughter, broadcast to the world. Vindication, proof, the end of their lies. But also exposure. My private humiliation dragged into the public arena. I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. "Not yet. If I stoop to their level now, it'll look like retaliation. I need to hold the line." Silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "Then hold it, and when the time comes, you'll know." The following week, things escalated again. Anonymous emails began landing in my inbox, vicious messages parroting the same accusations. Some even included doctored screenshots, twisting old text exchanges into false evidence. It was clear now, they weren't just trying to shame me. They wanted to destroy me. I stood in front of the mirror one night, staring at my reflection. My eyes looked tired, bruised with sleeplessness, but there was something else there too, something sharper. "They don't want reconciliation," I said aloud, voice steady in the empty room. "They want control." And for the first time, I believed it fully. My family wasn't grieving a lost daughter. They were mourning the loss of their ATM, their pawn, their captive. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it lit something else inside me. Resolve. Whatever they tried next, I would not crawl back. I wouldn't give them what they wanted. The envelope arrived on a Friday. Thick, official, stamped with a law office seal. I almost didn't open it, assuming it was another credit card offer, another pointless advertisement. But when I saw the return address, my chest tightened. Inside was a letter drafted in the language of intimidation. My family intended to pursue legal action. Emotional damages, it read. Claims that I had willfully abandoned my responsibilities as a daughter, leaving them destitute, humiliated, traumatized. It was absurd. But as I read, the words blurred, my hands trembling. They were really doing this. They were trying to drag me into court, not for money they actually needed, but to force me back into their grip. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter spread out like a weapon, my breath shallow. My phone buzzed. Elena. "I just got this," I said when I picked up, my voice thin. "They're suing me." There was silence on the other end, then a sharp exhale. "They've sunk that low?" "Yes," I whispered. "They want to use the law to prove I owe them, not just money, my life, my loyalty. Elena's tone hardened. Then it's time. You can't keep staying silent. If you let them write the story, they'll keep rewriting it until you're the villain forever. I pressed my forehead into my hands. If I release the video, it's not just them who'll be exposed. It's me. My humiliation. Everyone will see how pathetic I was, how blind. They won't see pathetic, she said firmly. They'll see the truth, and the truth will set you free. Her conviction rattled me. I wanted to believe it. That weekend, I carried the letter with me everywhere, folded in my purse, creased from being opened and closed, read and reread. It haunted me, a constant reminder that their fight wasn't over. On Sunday night, I stood in front of the mirror again, staring into my own eyes. For years, I had measured every choice by how it might affect them, their comfort, their approval. Now they wanted to make that dependence permanent, signed, sealed, enforced by law. But something inside me snapped. I opened my laptop, pulled up the file Elena had sent, the video. My family's drunken voices filled the room again. The laughter, the cruelty, the word ATM echoing. It no longer made me cry. It made me steady. I crafted a post, just a few sentences. This is the truth of the family I cut ties with. They want to paint me as selfish, but listen to them yourselves. I attached the video, hovered over the button. My finger trembled. Once I pressed it, there would be no turning back. I thought of my coworkers, my neighbors, strangers who might judge me. I thought of my parents' faces when they realized the whole world could now hear what they said behind closed doors. And then I thought of the letter in my purse, the audacity of their claim that I owed them my life. I pressed post. The screen refreshed, the video uploaded, and it was done. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. The fallout was immediate. By morning, my phone buzzed endlessly with notifications. The video spread faster than I imagined. Shared, commented on, dissected. People were horrified. Messages poured in. Strangers offering support, acquaintances apologizing for believing my family's lies, coworkers sending quiet notes of solidarity. And then the calls came, not from supporters, but from my family. My father, his voice raw with fury. "How dare you humiliate us like this?" My mother, weeping dramatically. "Marceline, you've ruined us. We can't even go to church now." Haley, spitting venom. "You'll regret this. Everyone will turn on you eventually." Colin, flat and cold. "You'll always be alone." I didn't answer any of them, but I saved every voicemail. Within a week, the law office quietly withdrew. No lawsuit, no case, no chance of dragging me into their theater of lies. It should have felt like victory, and in some ways, it did. I walked into work with my head high, no longer shrinking under whispers. Even Denise smiled at me, murmuring, "Good for you." But victory carried its own cost. The comments online weren't all kind. Some called me brave. Others called me cruel, a daughter who should have forgiven instead of airing dirty laundry. The internet never chose one side completely. And yet the balance had shifted. The narrative was no longer theirs to control. One night, sitting on my couch with a glass of wine, Elena texted, "You did it. You took their power away." I stared at her message, the screen glowing softly in the dark. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe it. Still, as the days passed, I knew this wasn't the end. Families like mine didn't just disappear into silence. They would lick their wounds, find new ways to lash out. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I had faced their worst, and I had chosen to expose it rather than hide. And that choice, for the first time, was mine alone. The silence after the storm was strange. Not peace, exactly, more like the echo that follows an explosion, where the world feels too quiet, too still. The video had been out for 2 weeks. My family's smear campaign had collapsed almost overnight. Their Facebook pages vanished, their accounts locked, their old allies suddenly distant. The lawsuit evaporated before it even reached a courtroom. But they weren't gone, just disgraced. Sometimes, as I walked home from work, I felt eyes on me, though when I turned, there was no one. Once, I spotted Haley's car parked 2 blocks from my apartment, the engine idling, her silhouette still in the driver's seat. She pulled away the moment I noticed. They hadn't forgiven me. They never would. But the difference now was that I didn't need them to. At the office, the shift was palpable. Colleagues who had whispered behind my back now smiled awkwardly, pretending they'd never believe the worst. Denise stopped by my desk one morning with a steaming coffee and a hesitant smile. "You're stronger than I realized," she said quietly. I thanked her, though inside the compliment felt heavy. Strength wasn't something I had sought. It was something survival had forced on me. At night, my apartment was quiet, too quiet sometimes. I missed laughter, even if it had been sharp-edged. I missed the illusion of belonging, even if it was built on lies. But I also relished the absence of demands. No guilt-laced phone calls, no sudden emergencies, no being reduced to an ATM. I filled my evenings with small rituals, cooking meals just for me, lighting candles while I read, walking through the park after dark, feeling the cool air against my skin. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the guilt loosened its grip. One Saturday, Elena invited me to lunch. We sat in a sunlit cafe, her laughter easy, her presence grounding. "You seem different," she said after a while, tilting her head. "Different how?" "Lighter, like you finally stopped carrying them on your back." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "You don't have to do this alone, you know." Her words lingered long after the meal ended. Alone had been my default for so long, I'd convinced myself it was permanent. But sitting across from Elena, I realized something. Blood might tie you to people, but choice could bind you to something stronger. That night, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker, I thought about what freedom really meant. It wasn't just absence. It wasn't just cutting ties. It was presence, choosing who you let in, who you trust, who you build with. My phone buzzed again, one of the few times I dared turn it on now. An unknown number. The message was short, bitter. "You'll regret this. We always find a way back in." I stared at it for a long time, then hit delete. My chest didn't tighten this time. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I whispered aloud to the night air, "Not anymore." In the weeks that followed, I began piecing together a new life. Dinner with colleagues who had once been only acquaintances. Weekend hikes with Elena, where conversation flowed easily, without hidden barbs. Evenings alone, where solitude no longer felt like punishment, but choice. The scars were still there. The voices of my parents, Haley and Colin, sometimes crept in during quiet moments, whispering accusations, demanding loyalty. But their power had dulled. They were echoes, not commands. One evening, Elena and I walked along the river, city lights reflecting in ripples across the water. She stopped, turned to me, and said softly, "You know, family isn't just who you're born with. Sometimes it's who stays, who shows up when they don't have to." I met her gaze, the truth of it settling deep. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't tethered to them, a future where I could choose. At home that night, I stood in front of the mirror again, the same mirror where I'd once whispered broken truths to myself. This time, I spoke with certainty. I am not their ATM. I am not their scapegoat. I am me. The reflection staring back wasn't the same woman who had set the dining table weeks ago, desperate for approval. She was someone new, someone stronger. Alone, yes, but not empty. Free. And that freedom was worth every scar,